Those are the things that you need to do on a daily basis, and then function declines. So all you need to do is the exact opposite of that.
How could you overcome that? Or can you?
Your vocabulary is one of your best predictors of long-term dementia.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, president of Parker University, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Tommy Wood.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. So I'm a neuroscientist. I run a basic neuroscience lab, looking at different ways to protect the brain across the entire lifespan. So starting right at the beginning after birth, all the way through to TBI protection and dementia prevention. I also do some work looking at elite sports cognitive performance, particularly in Formula One drivers.
So we have a very strong interest in living better years, and we have a project we're trying to live 20 more good years. Somebody who's maybe in their mid-60s, what advice would you give to them to live 20 more good, functional, with high cognition years?
In my mind, the most important thing for maintaining function is that we keep stimulating those functions of the brain and the body. So if you want to be physically capable to do anything around the house, go up and down stairs, lift, carry, those are the things that you need to do on a daily basis, and it needs to be difficult. You need to stimulate the body in that way. It could be through resistance training, or even just around the house. There's a whole bunch of different activities you can do just to get the body stronger. That's really, really critical. And one thing that happens when we get older is we just stop doing those things, right? We take the escalator or we take the elevator instead of taking the stairs. We stop carrying the shopping because maybe we've got somebody younger to do it for us. Those things, as we stop doing them, our function declines. So we need to push really hard and keep doing that. Like the amount that you can maintain function and health just by not giving up and just like keeping going, that's the most important thing. So from a physical standpoint, making sure we stay strong and fit. Resistance training is particularly good for the brain for executive function, so decision making as we get older. And then for cognitive function, if we're thinking about how well our brain is working as we get older, we need to do complex things with our brain, because that's what really drives function. So that can be the way we socialize with other people, make sure we still do that. Learning new skills, that can be through physical activity, right? Learning some kind of new sport. Dancing seems to be one of the most important activities we can do for the brain. Languages, music, anything that sort of uses multiple networks in the brain and stimulates them. And that process of learning, failing is really the most important thing we can do, because actually failure is what drives improvements in the brain. It drives neuroplasticity. So making sure that we're doing stuff that's hard for us and failing at it, and then slowly getting better over time.
So what do you see happening with people as they kind of slow down? They go, well, I'm getting older, I'm going to back off on a few things. What's the natural tendency for people to do, and how can we combat that?
That's exactly it. And part of that idea, I think, is driven by the fact that as a society, we think as you get older, function declines. But there's a huge amount of evidence that shows that doesn't need to be the case. The problem is we just still need to do those things in order to maintain that function. So there's this idea called stereotype embodiment theory, where people embody this stereotype of somebody who gets older and slower over time. And as you embody that, you stop doing these things that support function, and then function declines. So all you need to do is the exact opposite of that. Know that you can maintain function and strength late into life. And there's a huge amount of evidence that shows that's possible. And then, anytime you're thinking, oh, I'm too old for that. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I might hurt my back. Just fight that feeling and really lean into it. And then that's what's going to maintain function.
Recently had a reunion with people I served in the military 45 years ago, an elite unit. And as we got together, they embodied, a lot of people embodied or expressed that in their life, that getting older, and for me, I tend to compare myself to the 21-year-old Bill or the 21-year-old at my campus.
Yeah.
And I keep pounding it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
So what other advice? We talk about grip strength as an indicator. We talk about that. Is it grip strength, or is grip strength a biomarker for something else?
I think it's maybe a little bit of both. A little bit of grip strength tells you about the fact that you're using your hands. And we know that inputs to the brain are really important. And so if you're constantly out there manipulating stuff and doing things with your hands, that's probably continuing to stimulate the brain, right? That's very different from just like sitting in a chair and watching TV. We know grip strength is going to decline because you're not using your hands in that way. However, the reason why we have a lot of data on grip strength is because it's easy to measure. So if you're trying to do a study in hundreds of thousands of people, getting them all to do a 1 rep max on the leg press or something is just going to take too much time. So then people say, well, grip strength is associated with less dementia or less cardiovascular disease. I'm just going to train my grip. That's not how people develop grip strength. You develop grip strength because you're getting stronger overall. So your grip gets stronger when you do a deadlift. Like I would do that instead, and you're building whole body strength. It's probably a proxy mainly of overall strength rather than being the thing that's really important.
So we see certain clinicians who become famous with their books, and one of the things they're doing is having people work on their grip strength.
Yeah.
And it might not necessarily be the thing. It might be indicative of something else that they're doing. Training for longevity. What specific exercises would you recommend for someone to do?
If I was training for longevity, then I would structure my training in a few different ways. The most important thing is just not being sedentary for long periods of time. So we know that being sedentary for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time decreases cognitive function, and then it's also associated with increased cardiovascular risk. And you don't need to do much to break that up. You get up, do a couple of squats, just climb some stairs, just move around, right? Because actually being sedentary is probably a big part of why physical inactivity is a problem. And then from there, just like a lot of low-level physical activity, so getting your steps in, right? 8, 9, 10,000 steps a day. Then probably 2 or 3 times a week, at least, you sort of do a little bit more aerobic kind of challenge, 30, 45 minutes of something like brisk walking, dancing, playing a sport, something like that. And then on top of that, if you add a couple of times a week of resistance training, that seems to be the optimal dose for the brain as we get older, is 2 times a week lifting weights. Again, can be something very simple, 6 to 8 different exercises, cover the whole body, 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, like super basic programming, actually changes the brain even as we get older.
So something I've observed is with my age group peers in their late 60s is almost like a mental tunnel vision, or losing their peripheral vision, where they don't, their mind really focuses it more tightly. They take these very easy pathways that they develop, idiomatic speaking instead of having meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And I see people just really tightening up that tunnel vision. How would you describe that as a neuroscientist?
There's actually a lot of data that shows how as our function declines, we sort of use a much narrower band of those functions. So that could be visually, that could be how we talk, that can be how we function physically. And it's basically getting to the point where the way I think about it is you have less headroom, you have less total capacity in the system. So as the total capacity you have shrinks, then all you can do is just the very basic functions that you maintain. But the reason why that happens is because you haven't been investing in maintaining those functions. So we know that like your vocabulary is one of your best predictors of long-term dementias. But in order to maintain your vocabulary, you need to go and have complex conversations with people where you then have to talk about a whole wide range of subjects. So if you don't do that and you just have the same people, the same group, you do the same thing again and again, your vocabulary is gonna narrow because you're not using it. And similarly, the vision is the same. If you just spend all your time looking at TV or a phone screen, you're no longer providing input to that full kind of peripheral vision. And we know that vision is also trainable and it follows function. And that's one of the reasons why nature is particularly beneficial, is because actually it forces you to use this full peripheral vision. So it's really to do with how we stop using aspects of our function, and that can be how we talk or how we see, how we physically move. And because of that, we lose the functions that we're not using.
So somebody's already lost that or narrowed into that tunnel vision of the mind. How could you overcome that? Or can you?
I think even as we get older, there's a huge amount of evidence that shows that the brain can still adapt to inputs as long as we provide them. So we often think that as we get older, I just can't learn new stuff anymore. My brain's too old to do that. And that's really not true. So if you're starting to lose visual function, physical function, language function, what you need to do is then apply that idea of progressive overload, like you would if you were training the body. So you just go and try and push yourself a little bit more. You try and regain some of those functions. And the brain remains plastic. It will still respond to stimuli even very late into life. It probably only stops right in sort of severe dementias. Your brain is actually capable of a lot more as you get older. You just have to actually ask it to do that.
So we know with uncorrected hearing loss and cataracts, there's less input, and that is a risk for dementia. So if you get hearing aids early, it prevents it. Or if you get cataract surgeries early, it prevents it. If you get it late, can it reverse it?
So there are several studies that show that all the different sensory inputs into the brain are important for maintaining function. So that includes vision, that includes hearing. It actually includes like peripheral nerves and peripheral sensation, includes smell. And if we lose those, then there's a significant increase in dementia risk. And I think there's two parts to it. One is the brain has lost that input, so it's going to retract those functions. But equally, if we don't hear as well or we don't see as well, we're not going to go out and interact with the world because it's difficult. We can't understand things as well. We can't see as well. It feels scarier to be out there. So then we're, again, providing less input. However, there's for both hearing loss and for vision loss, there's evidence that regardless of age, and actually the higher your risk of dementia at the time that you get either hearing aids or cataract surgery, the greater the benefit you're likely to get. So even later in life, you can still intervene and reverse some of that risk.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to bring you out to our neuro center. We have some novel treatments that we use for people. One of them is a gyrostim.
Mm-hmm.
Are familiar with it?
Oh, yeah. And I think I saw some pictures of it yesterday.
Oh, my. So I've been on that. So you're spinning. So you get posterior column stimulation, vestibular apparatus, cerebellar stimulation. Then you start shooting targets with laser guns.
Yeah.
So now you have eye-hand coordination stimulating. Then they'll start asking cognitive questions. Mm-hmm. As you go, it's exhausting. But I remember the first time I did that, driving home, I felt I had Spider-Man senses where I knew where all the cars were. I could tell my peripheral consciousness expanded, that it's done something to stimulate neuroplastic changes. Are there treatments like that that are in our horizon that we can use to increase cognition and neural function?
I think there's a lot really on the horizon in terms of complex cognitive stimuli that we can apply quite broadly. One of the problems that has existed in the field of cognitive training is that the cognitive training has been quite basic, right? It's something on one computer screen and you have to click some stuff and follow some stuff. And yeah, there's some evidence that it provides benefit, but that's not how our brain really interprets multiple stimuli, right? We're constantly seeing, hearing, interacting, moving. And there are ways that you can do this in the lab, and it requires a lot of equipment, and you can stimulate. So like vestibular stimulus seems to be one of the greatest triggers of neuroplasticity, I think, because it's almost like it's like a threat, and like you don't know where you are in space, and the body works really hard to correct that. But I think virtual reality is a place where we're going to see a lot of that, because you can have vision, hearing, you can do all these complex movements, and there's a few different systems that will allow us to then like have patients do this in their homes. They don't have to always come into the lab. We can do this on a larger scale. So I think we're right at the beginning of some really exciting stuff there.
And we're implementing virtual reality and augmented reality in our therapies too, and actually high-end operators shooting scenarios where there's reaction, and it's fun. It's gamification of the rehab. So it's actually gamification, learning, and integrating that. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience that I may have left out of asking you?
Nowadays, if anybody wants to talk about longevity, particularly for health span, I just keep coming back to the idea that the most important thing is how you use your brain and body, because when you stimulate any cell or tissue in the body, that then stimulates anti-aging processes, it stimulates adaptation, it stimulates increases in function. That's what drives the whole thing. And then, nutrition is important, sleep is important, stress is important, of course. And that helps sort of guide that process. But really, it's all driven by how we use our brains and our bodies.
Well, Dr. Wood, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Dr. Tommy Wood, and this is Parker University.